Three, two, one. This is the Rich Report, bringing you the richest content across entertainment. My name is Cameron Richardson. Welcome back to the channel. Joining me today to talk about Taylor Swift's new record, surprise record, Evermore. Sabrina Proffitt, a huge Taylor Swift fan. Sabrina, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How you doing, Cam?
I'm doing well, another day in 2020, so you just trying to survive as usual. And before we get into Evermore, I kind of want to talk about your Taylor Swift fandom because I know you pretty much, there's never been a day where you hide about how much of a fan you are. So tell me just why you like Taylor Swift and what she's meant to you just throughout your life.
Yeah, so definitely. I began being a Taylor Swift fan when I was like 6 years old. When her first album came out, I heard her song, Our Song, on the radio, and ever since then, I was a fan. At first, of course, it was just because of the music. She's the queen of pop at this moment, and so when I was younger, I just loved her music, loved everything about it. But then as I got older, it was just more of about her and her personality and how much of a good person she is. And so it was just a little more than music after that, especially after the album Reputation came out. There was just such a shift in me understanding that, like, these celebrities are people and they go through so much. And I just think she is such an interesting type of celebrity because she's the type of person that literally invites fans to her homes to listen to albums before they come out. She donates like crazy. But it's also really interesting because I've gotten to know so much about what it's like to be that high of a celebrity and how life is and how you kind of have to put out boundaries so you can like have your life and not be, you know, I don't know, looked down on for every single thing you do in your whole life. So I honestly just think she is a really great role model and just a really great person, but she's also extremely talented. So that's just kind of why I followed her for so long and just been such a big fan.
Yeah, and me growing up, I never liked Taylor Swift, never just had this real hatred, but I didn't know why. I guess it was just because I wasn't just a big pop music fan. And maybe it was the Kanye fan in me who sort of who was following his propaganda of hating Taylor Swift. There's this, rivalry going on between them. Of course, the VMA Awards, that little outburst he had. But then you realize, okay, as the years go on, this guy is insane. Granted, I still respect his production for music, his ear for music. He still puts out pretty solid stuff aside from Jesus is King. Let's not go back there. But then I was like, okay, I'm gonna give Lover a chance. Back in the album from 2019. See, okay, let's see what I've been missing for 10 plus years. And it was not the greatest record ever, but I still quite enjoyed it. I think it was a little bit more tame. It wasn't that these crazy, what I find, corny pop songs is sort of, it was like, oh, okay, this is pretty easy to listen to. And then get to this year, she surprises everyone with Folklore, and I thought that was brilliant. Not there's no hype for this record. Nobody knows about it. I think it was only a couple days this time for Folklore, and I was really just blown away. It wasn't a perfect record, but there were just a lot of songs like Illicit Affairs, August, Seven, Exile that just stick with you. They're very sticky songs. It's like I can listen to these, at any point throughout the day. And so I want to know from you, because there were some mixed reactions. There were some Taylor fans I knew that were like, I don't like this sound as much. I prefer the more poppier sound. And then some that are like, I was ready for this change. So I want to know from you, what was your initial reaction when you heard the drastic change in sound on Folklore?
Yeah, well, I think it really has to do with her maturing as an artist. But not only that, but her being a label that respects her and lets her do whatever she wants. And I think that's a crazy change for her because before Folklore and before Lover, she was on a record label in which was very controlling. And so getting this type of music that is just raw and real and different but it's something that you can tell she clearly loves. It's definitely a passion project. I think it's amazing. I think we're finally getting to see what she really just truly loves and is truly working on. And I think it's been great. I love it.
Yeah, I really had no complaints. Of course, there were some songs I was like, okay, I could do without, but still, I was still really blown away. And then last Friday, literally the morning of this album being released, oh hey guys, I'm dropping a second album this year, and everybody was just, all right, hold back, because I had a schedule of album reviews I was supposed to do, and now with the Cuddy album, which I didn't really like, and the Taylor album, I was like, okay, now my schedule has to change entirely because this is going to take a lot of time, and it was a quite a long album. And this one, I even find more of an improvement from Folklore. Folklore, now here's the thing. Here's a little issue I'm having is that I like the songs more on, I think they stick with me more on Folklore, but I think the quality is more consistent here. I think her songwriting is just A+ here. I mean, it usually always is, but I just think she nails it here. But we got to start with the first song here in Willow, the lead single. Not as big as a fan. I'm not as much as a fan of her going to this higher register. I kind of, the verses are fine, but the hook I'm just not, as in touch with it. To me, like I said in my review, if anybody's ever listened to Monica in her prime, it just comes off a little bit like that. I'm like, okay, that's not really a sound you go with. So why for this song? But I want to know from you, what were your thoughts on the lead single?
It's so interesting because for me, I love Willow and I think it's really different, but in a good way. And it's kind of funny because when I first listened to Cardigan, which was the first single from Folklore, I at first didn't really like it. It really took me aback and I was kind of like, what is this sound? Like I've never heard her sing like this before, and I was just kind of like taken aback by it. But I love Cardigan now. But Willow, right away, I was like, oh, this is really pretty. I really like this song. So it's kind of funny that you had kind of the opposite reaction. But I like Willow. Willow's in like my top three.
Yeah, it's definitely not a terrible song. It's just I was like kind of just caught off guard with her going into this register that she doesn't really explore that often on the hook. So definitely not the worst song on this album, but we see the improvements quickly in Champagne Problems. And this is one of the few times throughout the album where she opens up about mental illness. And I really appreciate, like I said, the same thing I said about the Phoebe Bridgers album, just these people who are held at such a high standard, but then being able to open themselves up and be vulnerable with, who knows who's listening, the millions of people that listen. And, she talks about her mental illness, and there's this relationship where the guy's getting ready to propose on the night, but then she's getting ready to end it. And it's very, it's not a fun sounding song, but it still sounds fun. But at the same time, this is a gut punch. So I want to know, what were your thoughts on Champagne Problems?
No, Champagne Problems is my number one on this album. I'm obsessed with this song. I love the storytelling. I think it's beautiful. I love exactly how you talked about how she's so much more open now to talk about mental illness you know, and especially the line in the bridge about, she's fucked in the head. People just being so judgmental against people who have mental illness as well. And so I love the song. This one's number one for me.
Really? I gotta say, I'm kind of surprised. It's one of my favorite tracks on the record, but it doesn't. For me, it's not gonna be a song like I go back. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna listen to this. You know, the stuff in my like daily playlist. It's probably not gonna be one of those. But what is Gold Rush? I absolutely love this track. And I find it incredibly fun how she plays it in a way where she's daydreaming in one verse and then she snaps out of it in the next. She's like, I really like this guy, but at the same time, there's 50,000 women going after him. So, you know what? Forget about it. I'm not going to go through all that. So, yeah. What were your thoughts on Gold Rush?
Yeah, Gold Rush definitely has Jack Antonoff written all over it, much like August, Getaway Car, those other types of Taylor Swift hits that are a little bit underrated. Gold Rush, it's really, really good. But I don't know, it wasn't super stand out for me. and I don't know why, but I do like it and I respect it as a song. And I love Jack Antonoff, and anything he produces is always incredible.
Now, I hope you don't get mad at me here, but this is where I see we get sort of a tail off on the next two
Mhm.
tracks. I do not hate Tolerate It. I think it's written perfectly. I just don't like it much sonically. But Tis the Damn Season sort
Mm,
of reminds me of that little old Taylor Swift that I wasn't a fan of. I know you're shaking your head, but Tis the Damn Season, not one of my favorites, but Tolerate It. It's just weird. It's just weird, contradiction of I don't like it sonically, but the writing, it's like this is punching me once again. It's another emotional gut punch. But I want to know your thoughts on these two tracks.
Yeah, well, something I wanted to mention is that honestly, for me, some of the songs really felt like old Taylor, just like you said. And I think some of that is coming out of she's doing her re-recordings at the moment, in which she's re-recording all of her old albums so she can own them again. And I really feel like her diving back into her old songs really had a hand in this album because Tolerate It, Tis the Damn Season, so many songs kind of have little ties back to old songs. And they felt so like kind of homey. Like I recognized the songs before I even knew them. And I really, really do think that's from re-recording. So I don't know if that's it might be a bad thing for somebody who doesn't love her old music as much as I do, but I kind of love how they're kind of, tying themselves back to her past.
Yeah, I don't hate Tolerate. It's just that Tis the Damn Season. Okay, okay.
Okay, it's it's really well, okay, so the thing about Tis the Damn Season is I feel like I don't know. I feel like Folklore was kind of a childlike album in some weird ways. Like we have the Teenage Love Triangle, we have Seven, and then we have Evermore, which has songs about being proposed to, rejecting proposals, murder even. We have a lot more mature songs, and I kind of liked the Damn Season for that because it kind of gives you a peek of what these teenage love triangles turn into after somebody leaves home and goes to college and then comes back and reignites that flame. And honestly, I haven't heard many songs about that topic, and so I like the Damn Season. I think it's kind of fun.
Yeah, no, this album in general, I think, is literally a direct sequel to Folklore. And when I saw Folklore, it was literally folk stories, childhood stories and, the teenage, relationships. And, Evermore, I feel like is okay, now you're an adult, you're in this long-term relationship, but now you're fantasizing. Maybe it's you have this anxiety about what will happen if I do get proposed to, and just all the things running through your head, what happens, before and after the wedding. And so I think we see that play out, pretty much almost in chronological order throughout the entire record. And now
Yeah.
this leads me into my favorite track on the record and my possibly my favorite Taylor song ever, and No Body No Crime. I love this song so much. And I remember watching the long pond sessions with my mom, who forced all of us to watch it for some reason. But it was fun. It was fun hearing her talk about her thought process into each song, and and she brought up loving true crime podcasts, and that plays out entirely here. And you could tell that she had a lot of fun making this song. It's a complete dive back into her country roots. Haim does a great job on this record as well, giving their vocals as well. There's just so much. There's nothing to hate about this track. I mean, I love the hook. Is just you could sing that all day long, really.
It's
Uh,
so much.
I I really only have praise for it. I love the whole, flaunting about, okay, I can cover my tracks if I choose to help my friend here murder her cheating husband. I think it's just fun written all over it. And I had this weird comparison to where it was I saw the verses as Carrie Underwood's Before He Cheats, but then the hook comes off. If anybody's ever listened to it, hold on, I gotta find the track real quick. But hold on. I'm gonna have to cut this out. uh, it is. Blondie's "The Tide Is High." It's a cover. The
Mhm.
Blondie's cover of "The Tide Is High."
Love that.
On the hook, it's not, obviously they don't sound the same, but there's just a little, seems like an influence on both the hooks. They sound
Mhm.
sort of similar. Where you like, if you go and listen to them at the same time, it's like, okay, I can see what you're talking about, but you're still crazy, Cameron. So I want to know, do you love this song as much as I do, or is this, not one of your favorites, but it's still a good track?
Yeah, no, I definitely love the song, and Haim did amazing on it. It's really fun, upbeat. It's fun to sing. It's that type of thing. But every time I listen to it, all I can think of is "Before He Cheats," and all I can sing is "Right Now," and it just reminds me of that song so much, which is not a bad thing. But in some ways, it feels very radio friendly, and like this could be a great single, which is not a bad thing either. But throughout my time as being a Taylor Swift fan, I've always leaned more toward the unlistened to songs that people kind of ignore in favor of these type of songs. But it is a good song overall. It isn't written as well as the rest of the songs. It doesn't have that gut punch like most of them do, but it's fun and I like it. And I think Chaim did amazing on it.
And speaking of gut punches, we're thrown for a loop on "Happiness," because "Happiness" is not what the title track, says it will be. It's
Mm.
coming to terms with, past relationships, and I definitely love the part where, she wishes for, her ex's future relationships to suffer, but at the same time she knows that that's a selfish decision, selfish thought to have. And I know, in a past relationship I had, I definitely had those thoughts, but I realized, okay, you know what, it's not good for me. It's not good to wish this upon somebody else, because at the end of the day, you know yeah, sure, the ending did hurt, but at the end of the day, there's going to be happiness, in the future. So there's no reason to have hate in your heart for all this time and to hold grudges, even though you may have been hurt at the end. So I want to know, another emotional track. So what were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I really think Happiness is a great mature song and it shows Swift like maturing as a writer and a person. Because, like you said, she pulls back and is like, no, I don't need to wish anything bad on you because, you know, and I think it's so interesting too because it's also, you can look back on your past relationships and look at the happy times and, know that you were happy in some moments, but know that even though you're not together anymore, you still can be happy without them. And I think that's so incredibly mature because so many of Swift's breakup songs are so, this is it, it's over, look at all the bad times, But I think this one's really interesting because she's saying, you can look back at a relationship and still see all the happy, beautiful moments you had, but still know it's over. And I think that's awesome.
Absolutely. And the next two tracks, I sort of just, I found them forgettable. Okay. Is it all right? Is it pronounced entirely as like, is it Dorothea, or is it Dorothea? I'm
Dorothy. Yeah.
yeah, I can't pronounce anything anymore. I didn't. I was not a fan of either Dorothea or Coney Island. I'm intrigued by this expanded universe with Betty and what we heard on Folklore, but I just found it pretty forgettable. I didn't enjoy the instrumental as much, and then Coney Island wasn't a backtrack up until I heard the Nationals' Matt Berninger sing, and I'm like, why does Taylor have this affinity for teaming up with these grizzly, like, deep voices? And while I do like Justin Vernon of Bon Iver's quite a lot, I just don't think it works on a track. I don't think the Nationals, Matt, I don't think he did that good of a job. I just don't think they complemented their voices all that well. So what were your thoughts on these two tracks?
You might be surprised, but I do agree on both of these. Neither of these were standout tracks for me. I like Coney Island better than I like Dorothea. Um, but I do agree. Neither of them were something that I was like obsessed with after first listen. But they're still great songs. And that's the funniest thing about Taylor Swift songs, especially on these last two albums, that even like the worst songs on the album are still amazing tracks and are still written incredibly well, but not the best of the picks, but yeah, no, I agree on both of those. I like his voice more than you seem to, but I don't think it's all too different from Exile and Folklore. It sounded very similar to me. Um, yeah, have to
We
agree.
get we get a follow up to Illicit Affairs on Ivy, which Illicit Affairs I feel like was more, teenage, going out and, maybe getting with somebody else there while you're dating someone you don't really know. Okay, you don't know if you're gonna be fully committed to this person, but Ivy, you're married now, but now you're getting with like, another guy that you've fallen for outside of your marriage, and that's big no. But again, another great track. I really love the vocal harmonies on the hook. They were the highlight that made the song, great for me. So your thoughts on this, and how do you compare it to Illicit Affairs?
No, I absolutely agree with everything you said. The vocal arrangements on the hook are so beautiful. I fell in love with it as soon as I heard it. So Ivy's like my number two on this album. But I definitely like comparing it to Illicit Affairs because Illicit Affairs is very immature and naive. Especially with the bridge being like, you taught me a secret language. I can't speak with anyone else, very desperate, very like, I need you. We can't end this. And Ivy is very like, oops, I married. Like, I shouldn't be doing this. And so I definitely think they're two sides of a coin for sure. And I love Illicit Affairs. Illicit Affairs is one of my favorite on Folklore, but I love Ivy too. And they're just definitely same story, but very different age. Like one seems very mature, childlike, and the other seems, like you said, married. And I like how the point of view in Ivy is very like, I know I shouldn't be doing this, but I am. And that's kind of makes it fun too.
Now, in terms of songwriting and storytelling, I found this to be just one of the more out there and just interesting songs lyrically, and that's Cowboy Like Me. Okay, here's how the story goes. You got two people who are going to this, luxury resort, and they're going to try to swindle these rich people into, getting their money because, they're not the most, wealthiest of people. However, these two end up meeting at that resort and then end up falling for each other. And that it just, gives praise to Taylor's songwriting and just, the stories she wants to tell on these songs. And, sonically, I don't love the track, but I still just have to highlight it because it's a really, unique and unorthodox story. You would never imagine, a person with a celebrity with this sort of pretty much at the top, the peak of the celebrity food chain. She's probably the most popular musician out there, and she's talking about songs like this and telling stories like this. And I just find it really refreshing that we have artists telling these unique stories instead of the same old, love songs and just in general songs we hear today. It's very it's good that we have an artist of this stature, still willing to tell literally any story possible. Whatever pops in her head, she's gonna write it down. It's gonna be in a song. So love this track for the storytelling. So what were your thoughts on Cowboy Like Me?
No, I definitely agree. I think it's so fun because you can see that, and she's talked about it, how she doesn't feel as, stuck in her little box of only being able to tell stories from her own experience, in which she did so much in the past. And so she's kind of venturing out and just telling fun stories that she's made up. And that's so interesting because, we can see the type of stories she's drawn to and like what she likes to read and listen and watch. And that's really fun. And I think the storytelling on this one is really fun. But I also think it's really cool how throughout this song, there's this little guitar riff. And it sounds so much like the exact, like how Tim McGraw starts, which was her first ever single. And I think that's so fun because it's titled Cowboy Like Me. And her first song was Tim McGraw, and she's kind of tying the two together. And I just thought that was a really interesting thing to do.
And then on the next track, another highlight for me is that we get pretty much an ode to her partner who she found during the whole reignition of the Kanye beef in 2016, and how she's pretty much, you know, he pretty much helped her move on, and now she's coming to terms with that rivalry and ready to put it aside and finally closing that chapter in her life on Long Story Short. Just love the track in general. What were your thoughts on Long Story Short?
Yeah, I like Long Story Short. It's just really fun and it has a lot of ties back to older songs too. Like there's a lot of ties to Getaway Car, which is a fan favorite. And it's just kind of fun because people find little bits and pieces of the lyrics and then tie them back to things that have happened in our past. And it's kind of fun to play that like puzzle piece game. But yeah, Long Story Short is good. It's not super standout for me. It's not one of my favorites, but it's a fun track. It's one of the most upbeat, happy songs. So that's good.
Similar to the 13th track on Folklore, we get another tribute to one of Taylor's grandparents and her grandmother, Marjorie Finley. This song, I think, this is something I can connect with. That a lot of people can connect with personally, because I think a lot of us have really close ties to our grandparents, and we're really close to them. And even when they're gone, you still can feel their presence, sort of, in a way, and they're still active in your life, even though they aren't actually alive anymore. And I just think it's a really nice sentiment to have, and just a really pretty song in general.
Yeah, and I think just like Epiphany, this is a song that was really, really needed this year. So many people have gone through loss this year. This year I lost my grandmother, so the song hit like way harder than I ever would have if I hadn't. And just looking through the comments on the like lyric video for this song, like so many people are like, "Oh, I lost this person this year. This song means so much to me." And that's exactly how Epiphany was too on Folklore, because it talked so much about the pandemic and how so many people are going through such hard times this year. And so I really, really love this song just because she knows what her fans need in this time, and 2020 hasn't been easy for anybody.
Yeah, I think that's a good point you make, because a lot of COVID-19 is really going after people who have these prior health risks and are of older age. So maybe that's a lot of people, thousands of people maybe have lost grandparents and people of older age. So this one, I think, when people go and listen to it, I think it's going to connect with a lot of people, and it's going to hit really at home to those who have lost people recently to COVID-19. So yeah, definitely a good point you made there. And then we get to my least favorite track of the song. I don't have much love for Closure. I think it's written well as usual. The songwriting is never an issue on any of these songs, but I just think it's a total 180 direction. We have this really odd industrial folk, background to it. I don't think it works with the entire sound of the album. And then there's something with this hook where she decides to find her inner Drake, rips off, subtly an English accent on the hook, overpronounces every single syllable, and I'm just like, what is going on here? Now, I don't know if you found that yourself, but it's something that I'm just like, it sticks out like a sore thumb. This isn't, this isn't a song that I would expect on an album like this. Maybe it was, just I don't know, because all the other songs are written and performed pretty well, but this is one I'm just this is an odd sounding choice for a record like this.
Once again, I do agree slightly. I kind of like the funky background, like it's different, and I kind of like it. I don't know why, but it isn't a standout song. And I mean, like you said, it's written great, as all of her songs are. But yeah, the sound itself isn't something that draws me in. But that's also how I kind of feel about Long Story Short. This one and Long Story Short sit kind of close together for me and kind of are just there. But yeah, it's not high up for me, but once again, it's still a great song.
And then we get to the closer. Now, we were expecting the song, when you see featuring Bon Iver on a Taylor track, all right, get your tissues out, ladies and gentlemen. And when you hear that first piano note, it's it's about to go down. And Evermore is really just, I think it's a perfect closing to just this chapter with Folklore and Evermore. If you combine those two, I think this is quite possibly, the perfect ending. And it's a really deep dive into just depression after, getting hurt in a relationship, or just, you could really connect it to any moments of depression you have. And, this is probably the most connected I've ever been to any Taylor song, because if you know me, if you had a personal connection with me throughout August and until pretty much October, I went through these really difficult bouts on a daily basis. Some days were good, but some days it was just really down in the dumps, and you disconnect yourself from everything, even the things you love. I didn't enjoy sports for that time, and if you know me, that is crazy to think that Cameron could hate sports on any given day, and that's where it was, and you just keep spiraling down out of control until you yourself choose to move on and find that stuff you love. And this is how that track ends, is that you can get out of it. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. No matter how far you can fall into this state of depression and sadness, there's a path out of it. It's not going to end here. There's a way out of it. And I thank her for the song, really, because I'm like, this is exactly how I felt during that time. And here we are. Don't love it as much as Exile. I don't think Justin Vernon's voice his vocals aren't as great as they were on Exile, but still a good track nonetheless. It's definitely a song that I'm not going to forget anytime soon.
See, that's interesting because I think his vocals on this song are so much more to his style than on Exile. If you played me Exile and asked me who was like singing with her, I would have never known it was Justin or Bon Iver at all, because that's not really his typical style. But this song, I feel like he goes into that classic Bon Iver skinny love vocal, way of singing. And I really prefer that. Not that I prefer this song so much more than Exile, but I think he's so much more recognizable on this track than he was in Exile. But I also wanted to say that this song, not lyrically or sonically, just topically, reminds me so much of Peace from Folklore, because at first, Folklore and first on Peace and this song Evermore, I didn't really like either of them that much, but it's already grown on me so much because of the topic. And I think it kind of fits with Peace really well, because Peace is once again talking about mental health and how, like, she's never going to be able to give her partner the peace that she thinks he deserves. And I love that track so much more now than I ever did in the beginning. And I think this song is kind of that same type of thing about how, you can't really escape, your mental illness sometimes, but that's okay. And I really love this track. I love it a lot. And I think it's a perfect closing, just like you said.
Yeah, before we end this, I kind of want to go back to Tolerate It, because we've kind of just hit on how it sounds, but it's really an interesting story where, in this relationship, she doesn't feel as though the love she is giving is being received, instead of, showing it back. She literally says, all you do is tolerate it. So I want to know from you, just what you thought of that. That's, the story there. And have you ever felt that, personally in your life?
Oh, definitely. And this song to me just feels like Dear John Part 2. I don't know if you're familiar with her song on her Speak Now album, Dear John, but it hits on all of the same notes, and that's really interesting to me, because I kind of feel like maybe while she was re-recording, she kind of, dived back into how it felt to be with somebody who doesn't appreciate you. And I think the song is really, really great in that aspect. And it's kind of funny because even some of the lyrics kind of tie back to Dear John. Like when she says she uses all of her brightest colors for his portrait, there's a line in Dear John that talks about took all her blue skies and turned them to gray. And it just kind of has all those ties to it. And I really like Tolerate It. I think it's written incredibly well. And I think it'll definitely help a lot of people who are going through situations like that. And it might be the push that they need to get out of those situations. Because that last chorus really just turns it around and is like, what if, I got out of this relationship? What if I left, then what? And so I really think it could, if I had listened to it when I needed it, I think it definitely could have been that pushing factor. Like this song could be somebody's Dear John. And that's like insane for me because Dear John did so much for me.
Yeah, I think something I need to do, sometime down the future. I mean, it can't be anything soon because I still have a lot of albums to get to, but definitely going back to old Taylor and saying, okay, what was the sound then? Did I just hate it because I chose to hate it, or did I actually hate the songs themselves? So it's gonna be interesting if I do choose to go and revisit some of those uh, older outings from her. But that will do it for this video. Before we go, did you give a rating to this record? I mean, I gave it an 8, the highest score I've ever given a Taylor album. I'm more there are more catchy songs on Folklore, but I think the consistency is more on here. The songwriting is just A1 throughout every single track, and it's just another solid record, 3 straight now from
Yeah.
Taylor for me. And I'm ready to throw an Artist of the Year award at her, because that's 2 albums over an hour long, over 30 songs that and almost none of them are just god awful. It was a great year for her. I think one of the very few bright spots of a awful 2020. So yeah,
Yeah.
did you give this a rating?
Well, the funny thing is, I think I need more time with it. I think I need like a few weeks at least. Well, I still feel like I need more time with Folklore. Like I'm still like not ready to rate Folklore or, put it in my lineup of her albums. So I definitely need time on that. But something I wanted to mention about this album is that I think it's something she has never done before. And that's kind of funny because it's kind of an oxymoron, because obviously it is something she's done before because it's a sister album to Folklore. But in a different way, it's something she has never done before. And I think that's what makes this album so amazing, is because if you look at her past 5 albums, like starting with Red, the jump and the change between the 2 albums is drastic every single time. Like if you look at Red to 1989, insane. And then if you keep going from 1989 to Reputation to Lover to Folklore, like they're just so drastically different each time. And I think this time it's definitely like interesting for me as a fan, because I know this is what probably like any other fan base is like like sounds that aren't too drastically different. But going from Folklore to Evermore is just so like similar, which is not bad at all, but it's just so different. And I think this really has to do with, in her documentary Miss Americana, I don't know if you've seen it, but she talks about how she feels like women in this industry have to like reinvent themselves in order to stay relevant. And it makes me really happy that I feel like she doesn't need to reinvent herself anymore. She feels comfortable putting out music. Like even in Happiness, I wrote down a lyric. It says, and in the disbelief, I can't face reinvention. I haven't met the new me yet. And that line, as soon as I heard it, I was like, wow. Like this is the first album in which she hasn't completely changed everything, like gone from snakes everywhere to rainbows, or rainbows to like a forest aesthetic. Like this is the first time in which she has felt comfortable to just put out music that she loves and wants her fans to hear. And I think that in itself makes this album so amazing. And I guess I'm going to give it a 10, because I just love that she feels like she can do that. Like she doesn't need to reinvent herself, and that us as fans will still love her even if she's just releasing the same type of music. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sabrina, for joining me. And while this isn't one of our normal one-on-one Fridays, we had to do this. It was emergency because we didn't know about this album until the day of its release. So Sabrina, I appreciate you for taking the time to join me. I'm actually going to link her work with the Lumberjack and the Arizona Daily Sun in the description, so make sure to check that out. She's a phenomenal writer. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast as well, the audio versions on Spotify and Apple as well, because if you hate our faces, if you hate my face, go listen to the audio versions instead. Sabrina, I appreciate you for joining me, and we got the sports podcast coming out later today. Make sure all that will be up by the afternoon. appreciate y'all for watching, and we will see you in the next video. Have a great rest of your day.